Hello and welcome to this introductory lecture on the price system and the theory of the firm. This will form the first in a series of lectures on the price system and the theory of the firm. First of all, we're going to consider demand. Now, demand is a complex thought process in economics. However, we would reflect demand on a demand curve. A demand curve shows the quantity that consumers are willing and able to purchase at each and every price, ceteris paribus, or all things remaining unchanged. If things do change, for example changes in the consumer's income, the consumers are likely to want more or less at every price, and therefore the demand curve shifts. The outcome of considering this is the law of demand. The law of demand states that a higher quantity will be demanded at a lower price, assuming all other factors remain constant. The demand curve for a product or service depends on factors such as price, consumer's income, the price of other goods, advertising, and the consumer's tastes. Movements along a demand curve, also known as contractions in demand. A change in price will, as we have established, lead to a change in the quantity demanded. This is shown as a movement along the demand curve. Two diagrams in front of you that you have. One leads to a fall in price and a rise in quantity demanded. That's the one on the left. The one on the right, a rise in price leads to a fall in quantity demanded and a contraction occurring from demand point B to point A. The demand curve itself being linear in this case and labelled with the letter D. Shifts can also occur on a demand curve. A change in any of the factors affecting demand except price leads to a shift in demand. At each and every price there is increase or decrease in the quantity demanded, so the demand curve shifts. In the example shown, point B is the original demand curve. Falling demand leads to a quantity demanded falling to point A. Increasing demand leads to a quantity demanded increasing to point C. Outward shifts in the demand curve can occur because real incomes have risen, assuming that the good is a normal good. The price of a substitute product has gone up. For example, an increase in the market price of coffee should result in a demand for a now relatively cheaper tea product being available, should their unit price remain unchanged. The price of a complementary product has gone down. For example, a falling price of a car may result in the increased consumption of a petrol. This is reflected in a shift of the demand curve outwards. By outwards, in the same way that we were talking about production possibility frontiers, it would be to the right, as we normally describe an axis in the axes of both the vertical and the horizontal. The product is now being advertised more effectively. The population of the consumers available has increased. The tastes have changed, so people want their product as they find it now more desirable. More credit is available, so people can borrow more money, therefore consuming more products. As we've been observed so far, in the case of a normal good, with a price output response noted above, we would expect the demand curve to slope downwards. For the reasons we've mentioned, for those 7 reasons, we expect the downward slope of the demand curve to occur due to the law of diminishing marginal utility. In short, each extra good and service, each unit of each extra good and service will eventually give less satisfaction or utility. The consumer is only prepared to pay less for an additional unit of a good or service made available to them. It's worth noting that even though this tendency is for negative extra utility, or marginal utility as it's called, the total satisfaction gained still is increasing with each successive unit consumed. Consequence, a market demand curve is the horizontal summation of an individual's demand curves. In some cases, it can be observed that demand curves slope upwards. In these cases, the upward slope of the demand curve results in more demand with successive price increases. This can occur with both ostentatious, Veblen, and also giffen goods. Ostentatious or Veblen goods are goods that are fashionable, that people want the associated prestige from publicly buying. Giffen goods are goods which, when becoming more expensive, result in people having to sacrifice other products to spend their money on these. This may happen with key commodities in life, such as essential foodstuff. The giffen paradox is said to occur here. For example, if a poor family spends its income on bread and meat, a rise in the price of bread would make it impossible to afford a discrete amount of meat, with the consequence that there will be an excess income after maintaining the same level of bread consumption, which we use to purchase more bread. Hence, an increased consumption of bread despite the price rise. Income and substitution effect. If the price of a good falls, quantity demanded usually will increase because a substitution effect exists. The good which falls in price has become cheaper, therefore consumers may buy more. Consumers inevitably switch to the cheaper good. Also, an income effect exists. With a good falling in price, the consumer may afford more as she now has a greater real income. If they purchase the same amount of goods previously that they were purchasing, then money is left over. Therefore, the consumer has greater purchasing power. This leads to an income effect. Assuming a normal good, consumers want to buy more. Therefore, both income and substitution effects want to make the consumer buy more. If an inferior good is the case, consumers want to buy less and to switch to more luxurious products. Here, income effects work against substitution effects. The substitution effect is larger overall, so the consumer may end up buying more. If the good is a giffen good, the income effect works against the substitution effect and outweighs it. Overall, quantity demanded may fall when the price falls, making the demand curve slope upwards. As you can see, in the case of a normal good, we have a compounded effect, income and substitution. In the case of an inferior good, the substitution effect is partly eroded by the income effect, leaving an overall positive effect. In the case of a giffen good, a weak substitution effect is eroded by a larger income effect, leaving an overall effect in the negative. In order to understand why consumers behave the way they do in consuming products which satisfy their needs, we must now examine the levels of satisfaction derived from consumption of goods and services further. In order to maximise utility, a rational consumer, where I've discussed previously what a rational consumer is, that they want to maximise for their income the maximum amount of utility that they can get, will, given the constraints of limited income, a given set of prices which they cannot directly manipulate to their own end, and constant tastes and preference structures, consume products and services up to the point that the marginal utility of good A divided by the price of A will equal the marginal utility of good B divided by the price of good B will equal the marginal utility of good C divided by the price of good C. This is known as the equi-marginal condition. MUA equals the marginal utility of good A, PA equal the price of good A, etc. In short, the formula is such that an extra unit of satisfaction per real income unit, or pound, or dollar, yen, whichever currency you'd be using, equals that consumed for other goods. Should that not be the case, then consumers would increase their satisfaction by reorganising spending. Remember that consumers are assumed to be constrained by total income. Another convention that must be understood before we progress further is the topic of value. Value is intrinsic worth or price of a good or service. Early economic writers from Aristotle made the distinction between value in use and value in exchange prices, with, in many cases, the object of use value being measured by the cost of production. Interest in the concept of intrinsic value waned and attention was concentrated on prices, except in as much as intrinsic value can be equated with long-term equilibrium prices. Here economists note that there appears to be a paradox of value. Goods with great usefulness, such as water, command a low price, but those with little use, such as diamonds, are expensive. At first glance it seems very irregular. First known to Plato, however, he cited most in Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. It's justified on the grounds of justification for costs of production, especially labour theories of value. It's thought that the paradox occurs due to a law of diminishing marginal utility. Water has a high total but low marginal utility after the first unit of consumption, and diamonds the reverse of this. It's taken that prices are proportional to marginal returns, not totals, in that individuals will pay more for increased unitized satisfaction proportionate to the satisfaction derived from consumption of another unit. This is a key concept of neoclassical economists, and it can be shown graphically here. We've already established that demand is a function of the amount of needs and wants in a market, manifested by the economic problem of scarcity on income resulting in limited derived satisfaction, utility. However, there are several types of demand when considering the nature and demand in specific marketable products.